guys were able to pull off for that marathon.
No, it was. You know, and what is interesting about the Boston bombing is that these were linked not to ISIS but to the Chechen conflict, right? Which was a separatist area of Russia wherein the rebels against Russia went from kind of nationalist 1990s rebels to they were swept up in this kind of wave of Islamicization, such that by 2000 they were what you might imagine jihadist rebels to be. They conducted suicide attacks. They, committed mass casualty terrorism. For an emirate of some kind. So, there's so many elements of this Hydra.
Sure.
Whether it's Chechnya or ISIS or or Libya or whatever, that I think it's really getting to be national security priority number one.
Is it spooky to you when it's an ideology, obviously, it's differing from us. People have tried to get into the minds of these terrorists, and obviously they've interrogated them, and it seems like a lot of these guys do it for religious reasons. Isn't that what you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, it starts to be impossible to get away from the fact that there is, at the moment, for a variety of geopolitical reasons, sort of historical accidents, some historical actions, this really militant strain of jihadism that's powerful within Islam, right? That there's a whole network of training camps and funding sources and societies that are willing to not only tolerate but normalize the practice of either giving money to jihadist groups or watching young people go off to fight wherever, in Iraq, Bosnia, Syria, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, there certainly does seem to be a religious component. I mean, there is no equivalent to that anywhere else but the Middle East. And so I think defeating this over the long run, or at least, in the best case, sustaining ourselves until it burns out, is going to be a challenge, but it has to be addressed kind of at the root of the problem.
Yeah, Obama didn't even want to, utter the words Islamic terrorism. I mean, why is that?
Right. I think there were two reasons. I think one, quite genuinely, his administration believed that we could do everything anyway in terms of counterterrorism policy without saying those words, right? So we could surveil this community or that community, or we could wiretap this person or that person,
right,
or conduct counterterrorism without saying, this is a problem of Islamic terrorism, which his administration felt would alienate countries overseas like Saudi Arabia, Jordan.
Wait a second. Saudi Arabia, we got an odd issue with them as it is. That's kind of a funny relationship, don't you think?
I do. I think it's an extremely contentious relationship.
Never understood that. Never understood it. And that whole 9/11 committee thing where families could sue and now they can't sue. I mean, it's just that is a weird. That just gives me goosebumps when I think how spooky that sounds. Because all the nutcases were looking for a conspiracy. And then you kind of hear this stuff. Well, no, they can't sue the Saudi government. Well, we can, then you can't. And then you think to yourself, well, what in the world are families supposed to think? And moving forward, you're trying terrorism. And what are these people doing?
Right. And I mean, this is of course, a top priority right now. As you know, last year the Senate or Congress passed, which essentially gave Americans who were the victim of terrorism the ability to sue countries like Saudi Arabia that had links to the terrorists, and that stemmed out of course, the 9/11 attack, where prominent Saudis that were linked to the government and potentially linked to terrorists, had what's called sovereign immunity, meaning they couldn't be sued, by private Americans.
Right.
So now there's this huge issue of, well, clearly, this is a little bit of a poisonous relationship, that one of our closest allies has all these kind of slightly nebulous links to if not terrorism, then really, really anti-American actors who tend to be kind of violent, right?
Yeah.
And lots of schools and mosques and other charitable foundations that actually kind of promote that is really, really intolerant and really anti-American. And by the way, not just anti-American, but anti-Jewish, anti-Hindu, anti-Shia, anti-almost everything, including other Muslims.
That's
So,
tricky, tricky dynamics.
Yeah. So somehow bringing pressure on the Saudi government to reform internally is really the key, one of the keys to this whole terrorism mess. Now, the problem is the Saudi government has made some steps after 9/11 and even more after 2003 to stem some of its links to groups like Al Haramain, which is an Islamist charitable foundation that funnels money to terrorist groups. However, at this point, a lot of those institutions are almost self-sustaining, right? They get private donations from wealthy people in the Gulf. They don't actually need that much more government funding. So what you do about these kind of semi-private, self-sustaining institutions is going to be the next problem after you get some of the government action on these issues.
It's a lot of moving parts, that's for sure. And you're in intelligence, you understand this stuff, but it's just a lot of wheels moving at the same time, and we're trying to root out terror, and we're hoping we have enough people on our side to be able to do this. But for it to probably be permanently snuffed out worldwide, we're going to have a coalition we can trust.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Are you encouraged?
In the Middle East, that starts. What? Sorry. Go ahead.
Are you encouraged with leadership in Washington? Do you think the Defense Department is heading in the right direction?
I do. It's impossible not to respect James Mattis as a warfighter. Probably the best combat leader of his generation. I also think I happen to be one of the folks who's an admirer of Mike Flynn, the former National Security Advisor, who I thought was a genuine
patriot
and probably patriot and probably the best intelligence officer of his generation. I think Tillerson at the State Department is a very reserved guy, but he's a Texan oil man. I think he's very direct, very down to earth, really, really pretty impressive. And frankly, I think it's good that we're not tiptoeing around the fact that part of this national security problem is mixed up in religion, which is anathema for a lot of people on the left.
Absolutely, and as if we're anti this and we're anti that, and you're a bigot and all these nasty things. And we've said on their broadcast, and I really feel like Trump is just looking out for us as everyday Americans, and just looking out for our national security. And it's odd not to think that we'd want to protect our borders, because most countries do.
Most countries do, particularly when you have this much unauthorized travel across them. I mean, it is a little crazy that as a country we cannot summon the initiative to enforce the laws that are already on the books and defend our border. It's a gaping national security concern, if nothing else. And so, frankly, I hope that is the next thing the president's administration turns to, which is the border security, because that is a legacy project for him. There's a lot of good stuff tied up into that, including construction jobs, and I think it would really be positive for America.
Do you think we're going to see another terrorist attack over here that could equal a 9/11 in the near future?
No, not in the near future. I think there will be more lone wolf Orlando-style attacks.
Okay.
Orlando, San Bernardino.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the amount of plotting and logistical footprint that went into 9/11, we're actually doing better with this sort of thing.
Good.
Obviously, our national security infrastructure is a lot bigger to help defend against this. We're disrupting more things overseas. We're taking a little bit more risk in terms of counterterrorism operations. However, if we are at a point where we're no longer seeing 9/11, but we're seeing more Orlandos and more San Bernardinos, then are we really doing better? Because I'm not sure the numbers indicate we are.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I always thought, there are peaceful Muslims that live amongst us here in the United States. I've met them, and I believe it. There are that radical element, and I don't know how they'll be able to go around this with infringements and stuff like that. But there are mosques, and the United States is aware that there's imams that say awful things about America in America. And
right.
To me, if you don't root it out from where it's coming from, I don't know how in the heck we're ever going to be able to get a handle on it.
I agree. And look, this is a little bit of a tricky situation because, of course, in this country we have First Amendment protections, which means you can say whatever you want. So I think a good place to start is to say, okay, no foreign funding in to domestic religious organizations.
Yes, I agree.
Right. I mean, some of that funding from the Middle East that promotes an artificially radical version of Islam. Now, you could say, okay, now the only way we'll let that happen is if those countries have a reciprocal agreement with us saying we can support our communities over there, right? Because there are missionary Protestant communities in places like Russia that have American churches reach out to and engage with. So if there's a mutual kind of a mutual back and forth of those countries, then yeah, that's fine. They can, I don't really have a problem if the Ukrainians or whoever want to donate a building to the Ukrainian Catholic Church. But if those countries are so intolerant internally that they refuse to let American religious organizations engage in practices within their country, then they should probably not be sponsoring their version of Islam or whatever else in this country.
You bet. Andrew Peek is our guest, fellow in Middle Eastern Affairs of the American Foreign Policy Council. Let me ask you this. Out of all the threats, Iran, Russia, Syria, who is the biggest threat do you see as being America as worst right now? Korea, North Korea, with their new capability or proposably wanting to strike us? Who's our threat?
I think in the short term, Iran come to a new equilibrium in the Middle East with the other states in the region. Because since the Iran nuclear deal in 2015, Iran, as you know, has gotten up to $150 billion in cash.
Thank you, Obama.
Yeah, thanks to Obama, exactly right. Has been reintegrated into the kind of global community of nations that's made it a normal player again, with huge implications for its ability to conduct terrorism overseas, its ability to bully its neighbors. So how that settles down, because Iran's going to be able to dominate a larger sphere of influence than it did before. Seeing kind of where that influence lands and how states like Saudi Arabia, Qatar react to that, I think is going to be extremely concerning for the U.S. And this is why you see conflict in places like Yemen and Bahrain and Syria.
The oddity is that we already directly know, intelligence shows that they're funding those operations. I just can't see how we think we have a deal or anything that because they've violated it and the atrocities with just the pure pandemonium out there at sea where they're dissing our Navy guys. I mean, how they really don't like us very much. Do you think that there's going to be some kind of showdown, or you just think there's going to be some kind of forced sanctions where these people are just going to have to be back to square one again and crack down on them the hardest we can with sanctions so they can't get what they want?
Yeah, I think certainly on individual sanctions on people like the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards, that can be increased a little bit more on Iranian banks. I don't think we're going to have a showdown with them simply because I don't think they'll they'll risk it on their end right now because I think they see an administration that genuinely is attempting to push back on them and might be willing